guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my eating disorder story. And I felt compelled to do this video because it's not something that people usually openly talk about. And I know that when I was really struggling, it would have really helped me to see someone else's journey and how they went through it. So I'm hoping that this could be of help to you guys as well. So just to give you guys some background on my relationship with food and my body growing up, I was always underweight as a kid because I suffered with a lot of health problems growing up, and it was really hard for me to gain weight. But I had a really healthy appetite. I loved to eat, and I loved primarily healthy foods though. I loved my fruits and vegetables. I would go to the restaurant and I was only 4 years old and I would order a salad and the waiter would be shocked and my mom was like, hey, it's what she wants. And I would go to Florida with my parents and I was about 7, and all I wanted for breakfast was like a huge plate of pineapple. And so I really loved my healthy food, but I also loved my less healthy food, if you will. So the donuts, the ice cream, the chips, and all of that. So I had a very balanced diet and a healthy relationship with food growing up. And it wasn't until about 3rd grade where my diet started to consist of primarily junk food. So I met some friends that I was very close with at the time, and we would hang out all the time and we would get chips and chocolates and candies and we would watch movies and stuff, and we would just gorge on all of that stuff. But at that point it wasn't binge eating or anything like that. It was just eating and having fun with my friends, and I never felt guilty for any of it. Fast forward to 8th grade, which was a really hard year for me. My best friend passed away from brain cancer and my sister got hospitalized with anorexia. And in 9th grade, my parents got divorced and I decided to join the high school cheerleading team. And that's kind of when I decided that I should start losing a little bit of weight because I wanted to get thrown in the air higher and I was a flyer position. I didn't need to lose weight at all. I was at a perfectly healthy weight and I was quite slim already. And that's kind of when things started to escalate. I remember being obsessed with losing weight and I would force myself to do Pilates and run every day no matter how I felt, and I would force myself to eat super healthy, and I was only 15 at the time. And at this point my rules for how strictly to eat healthy or whatever weren't too severe. Like I was still including like whole grain bread and like fruit and homemade desserts, like healthy desserts that I would make. But I lost quite a bit of weight doing that and I didn't need to lose weight. I remember crying myself to sleep every night because I hated the way I looked and I wanted to be thin. And I created an Instagram account called Thin Is All, which is so sad. And I also had friends that I would compare myself to because they were all under 100 pounds and naturally super thin, and I was so jealous of them, I remember. And as time went on, I kind of shifted my focus to I want to be super skinny to I want to be lean and toned and I want to be healthy, except my idea of healthy wasn't healthy at all, to be honest. Like I was obsessed with eating healthy and working out and obsessed with getting abs and just looking shredded, but I would spend my days just thinking about food, preparing food, being at the grocery store and just looking at grocery labels for hours, and I missed out on so much of my life just to be healthy. But in reality, your mental health is part of your health as well, and I literally had no sanity. Like I would go to like friends' house and I would bring my prepped food and I would go to family gatherings and I would make excuses of why I needed to leave early because I didn't want to eat the unhealthy food that was there and all stuff like that. And when I think about it now, I think about how many things I missed out on because I was so focused on food. So in 11th grade is where things started to get significantly worse. So I was on my high school cheerleading team, which practiced 3 times a week, and I also joined a recreational team outside of school that practiced once or twice a week. And later on, I was asked to join an elite team outside of school from the same gym that practiced 2 or 3 times a week, and I accepted the offer. But this was also when I was highly in my orthorexia and spent hours a day researching on how to be healthy and watching documentaries and everything like that. And I was convinced that paleo and low carb was the way to go. So I think I was eating green vegetables for my primary source of carbs. I might have had like a handful of berries and like maybe like a small amount of sweet potato after my workout, but like only in my pre and post workout window, because otherwise I couldn't afford any carbs. And that's when, first of all, my health took a shot. Like, I lost my period for 6 months, and I know now that I had hypothalamic amenorrhea. I had all of the symptoms: loss of period, low libido, no energy, couldn't sleep. I remember my cortisol being so high. I got like blood tests and or not blood tests, but saliva and urine. And I did like a video on that earlier on in my page if you guys want to check that video out. But everything was out of whack basically, and my body was just a mess, and I was so anxious and depressed, and I couldn't sleep, and it just really wasn't a fun time. My body just wasn't happy at all, and at this point I wasn't at my lowest weight. I had gained a little bit of weight and muscle, but I was still quite lean and leaner than my body would have wanted, and I wasn't eating nearly enough for the amount of activities that I was doing. I was working out close to 4 hours every day, and this was like intense, like stunting, tumbling, dancing, jumping, like wouldn't stop. So as you could imagine, when you restrict yourself for so long, that's when my binging started to become significantly worse. I can't remember when my binging exactly started, but I remember that it became a lot worse. I would binge on entire jars of nut butter and sourdough bread with butter on it, and a shit ton of fruit, and just like a whole bundle of bananas, and like the craziest stuff. I would get like a jar of yogurt and nut butter, and I would like spoon 1 spoonful of yogurt and 1 spoonful of almond butter or peanut butter or whatever it was, and I would finish both the containers. It's crazy to me the amount of food I could eat, but my body was so deprived, and I would binge at this point like multiple times a week. Some days I would binge twice in a day. I was just out of control. I remember it literally ruining my life. I couldn't focus on anything else besides food, because when I would binge, it would be like a distraction from everything else that was going on in my life. I couldn't focus on my studies. I couldn't focus on any of my relationships. The only thing I could focus on was exercising and how I was going to compensate for like binging and stuff like that. And I would always like plan my food out for the next day. I had to eat like super clean, and everything needed to be perfect so that like I could compensate for the binging. And it was such a vicious cycle that I don't wish upon anyone. I remember during this time my mom would have like just bought a jar of nut butter a couple days ago or something, and would be looking for it, and I literally finished the entire tub and would like hide it in a garbage that she wouldn't find. I would bring it to the street, and she was just like looking for peanut butter to put on her toast, and she would search the entire like kitchen and be like, where did we leave the peanut butter, like where the hell is it, like I just bought it like 2 days ago. And I would just sit there like, I don't know, like, and I would feel so guilty. And there was one time she was looking for me in the house, and I was crying and didn't want her to see me crying, so I just hid in my closet until she found me, and she wouldn't leave me alone until I told her what was wrong. So it was just like, I don't remember what I said, it was a long time ago, but I was like, I just ate everything, and like I feel guilty about it and everything like that. And like, I don't know if she understood or not. I don't know if my family really knew exactly what I was going through. I think they thought I was okay, like because I was eating and stuff like that, but I don't think they know exactly how much it actually impacted my life in a negative way. I remember trying everything and feeling like nothing would work. I would try to cut out sugar from my diet because I was convinced that I was addicted to sugar, and that was the reason why I was binging. And then like I would binge on stuff that wouldn't have sugar in it, and I would be like, okay, this is not the problem, so what if I need to include all foods? And I would still binge because I was so not used to eating those foods that of course I was gonna binge on them, but in my head I didn't know that there was a process to it. I was just like, oh, I'm still binging, like this is not the answer. And it's like I was looking for a quick fix. All of these different diets, like the paleo, the keto, everything, like I tried all of the diets, and I know the answer is not a diet, but I thought that was the answer. So in 12th grade, I decided, you know what, like I can't live like this anymore. If I need to gain weight, then so be it. So I went on a bulk because I was very into fitness at the time, so I called it a bulk. So I was basically focusing on building muscle and also just improving my relationship with food and hopefully minimizing my binge eating, which actually helped. I wasn't like binge free during this time, but it definitely helped. And during this like whole process, there was definitely times where I went like 1 month or like maybe 2 months where I wouldn't binge, but I would always relapse. So at the end of my first year in college was when I was working with a personal trainer at work, and I remember being in such a dark place. I was at my highest weight ever because I got there from the bulk that I did, and honestly I never was able to lose the weight afterwards. I was telling myself, oh, it's fine, you're gonna lose the weight after, but every time I tried to lose weight I would just binge more, and I was so upset. I would cry and have such a big breakdown every time I would binge. I felt so disgusted with myself, so guilty. I literally like I couldn't stand like living like that. And so I was with this personal training, and I was like in a strength boot camp, and I remember feeling so guilty because I felt like I was basically emulating what everybody says, that you're gonna be like bulky if you lift weights and stuff like that. And I felt like I was just like showing a bad example because it's so not true that girls are going to get bulky from weightlifting. But because I was binging all the time, I did look bulky, and I hated the way I looked, and I had no confidence in myself. Like the gym was always a place where like it was anxiety relieving for me, but at that point it just caused me anxiety. I felt like everyone was looking at me and like being like, oh my god, she gained so much weight. I hated it. So another personal trainer that I worked with there at the time wanted to get me into powerlifting, so I was like, I have nothing to lose. I knew that things could only improve from there because I was at a really bad place, and when I first started powerlifting it was very positive for me. It kind of shifted the focus off my body and losing weight and just like being stronger, and when I was in the gym I felt really empowered, but it soon became to be something that wasn't very healthy mentally because I started cutting weight. As early on as my first competition, I remember I did a weight cut, so it was just like a water cut, but I remember the week before my competition I had binged so much, and I didn't want to disappoint my coach, because if you guys aren't familiar with powerlifting, it goes by weight classes. So I was really stressed out because I was supposed to be in a certain weight class. So we did a water cut, and so that made me lose like about 7 pounds, I think. And I remember the day before my first competition only eating like salad and like no dressing and everything, and I was a lot weaker than I probably should have been. After that, I started training for my second powerlifting competition, which was just a few months away, but I decided this time that I was going to put my recovery first, and I was just going to enjoy myself that summer, eat whatever I wanted, eat as much as I needed to fuel my recovery, not weigh myself, and just go into the competition weighing whatever I weigh, whatever weight class that was. So it was amazing. It was the first time that I was 2 months recovered, I think, and I felt so good about it. I felt like I finally had my life back. I remember, like, I would eat a lot of junk food some days, but then other days I would eat healthy and it would just all balance out. Like, I remember some days I would have, like, ice cream for supper, but I didn't care because I wasn't binging at this point. So I was just truly so happy that I finally found, like, a balance and everything. And turns out that I actually lost weight because of just not binging and just eating consistently. So I ended up being in the same weight class that I was my first competition, but without cutting water and all of those things. So that was good, and I really enjoyed that competition. It was really good, like, to perform and just feel 100%. Like, I remember the night before the competition, I ate like a 3-course meal, and it was just so freeing to, like, not worry about, like, what I had to eat and everything, and just going to the competition, like, as normal. After that, though, things started to go downhill. So I had a relapse of about 2 months because I started kind of restricting after seeing that I lost weight while intuitively eating for 2 months. I thought, oh, well, like, if I keep this up and just restrict here and there, like, I'll just keep losing weight. But that wasn't the case. So I thought, oh, this is obviously because I'm not eating enough. So I started tracking macros at that point, and it started as a tool to make sure I was eating enough, but it ended into restriction. I'm not going to go into all of my competitions and how I cut for them and everything like that because it'd be way too long. This video is already super lengthy, but basically I just kept losing and losing weight, and I kept cutting for each meet, and I would strictly follow my macros for the time being. The prep of my competition, I would follow them to a T, and I was super obsessed with them. I just remember, like, spending my entire days trying to manipulate my macros and making sure everything's perfect, and constantly thinking about food and literally planning my whole entire week in advance and taking, like, the whole weekend to meal prep everything perfectly, make sure it's perfect by the gram. And that's what I would do leading towards the competition, and after the competition I would just be in a full-blown relapse for months, and that was the vicious cycle I was in, and I kept dropping and dropping weight, and it kind of was like I was recovered, semi-recovered for like a month or two, and then, you know, I binge again. But leading towards nationals is where things started to look up a little bit. So I think I was 4.5 months binge free, and I was on cloud 9, and honestly I was in denial, and I read a lot about Candida at the time, and I watched this YouTuber that had tons of video about Candida, and I was convinced that my skin issues and my digestive issues were all linked to Candida without even doing any tests and everything like that. So I went to see a nutritionist, and she gave me a protocol to do the Candida cleanse. So it was a liver cleanse that I had to do, and then the Candida cleanse. And I thought that this wouldn't affect me. I thought I was completely recovered, that nothing could ever trigger me, even though this was a very restrictive diet. So the liver cleanse, you were allowed to have complex carbs, but you couldn't have any sorts of, like, natural sugar. And during the Candida cleanse, you can't have, like, any starchy carbs at all. Even, like, carrots and, like, beets and starchy carbs like that, you can't. It's literally, like, green vegetables and meat and nuts and seeds, and that's it. So I started the liver cleanse while I was prepping for nationals, and I was also cutting for nationals at this time, and I started losing weight really rapidly, and I kind of got addicted to seeing the number drop on the scale. And usually in powerlifting you want to weigh as high as possible in your weight class, but I was to the point I didn't care. I was like, oh, well, this won't affect my strength. So I kept dropping and dropping weight, and I weighed way below the top of my weight class and sabotaged my chances of placing, which was my goal for that competition. I came in 4th instead, and at the time I wasn't too upset about it, but looking back it's kind of upsetting, but I'm obviously over it at this point in time. After the competition I binged hard. Like, for the 2 days that we were in Ottawa for the competition, I couldn't stop binging, and even on the plane on the ride back, like, it wasn't a fun time, and it honestly ruined the last part of my trip. But when I came back, I was determined that I was gonna still jump on the Candida cleanse and get right back on track. I had a whole freezer stuffed with stuff full for the Candida cleanse, and I followed the diet for like a couple days and stuff, and then I would just binge, and I would binge on Candida friendly foods, and then there was times I would binge on non-Candida friendly foods, and then I would just try to do the cleanse again, and I kept losing weight to the point where I was like, oh, I'm gonna sign up for Worlds in the lower weight class, since I don't have a lot of chances of qualifying in the weight class that I did for nationals. And it completely blows my mind that I did that now. Like, if I would have followed through with that cut, if I would have like qualified for Worlds, it would have ruined me. So I'm so glad that I didn't qualify. I hope someday that I'll qualify in the class that my body's meant to be, but I'm so happy that I didn't put myself through that. And so basically that cycle went on for a few weeks, a month or something, and then I was like, this is it, like, I can't live like this anymore. So I decided to go back to macro tracking, and I decided I was going to reverse diet so I wouldn't gain too much weight. So I would slowly up my calories to try to minimize fat gain. So it was just a vicious cycle. I would just keep binging and then restricting, binging, restricting, and I would still refuse to up my calories. And then after a while I was like, okay, I'll up them like a little bit more, like as the reverse diet went on, and I was still binging. It was probably the worst relapse I ever had. I would binge multiple times a week for months, and it was also the first time I purged. And I remember being so scared because I thought, if I get into this, I will never get myself out of binge eating because I'll have an excuse, a way to compensate. And I thought to myself, I can't do this anymore. So I remember that week I was watching some YouTube videos on how to stop binging, and I was following this Instagram account, and it sounds super silly, but she was showing herself in such like a raw form of her binge eating. She was like so vulnerable, something that I hadn't seen people talk about. I don't really ever see people talk about binge eating because it's something that's so shameful and nobody really talks about. And she was like sharing her story, and she was wearing a crop top to go run, and she was like, just because I binge doesn't mean I'm less worthy, and that I should suffer because of this super hot heat. I can't remember where she lived, and it struck something in me. That night I went to bed and I was like, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to the gym and I'm gonna wear a crop top and I'm gonna be bloated because I've been binging for like 2 months straight, and it's gonna be uncomfortable, but I'm gonna force myself to smile and try to feel confident. I don't know, I just started slowly changing my mindset. Like, for a couple weeks after that, like, I would still binge. Instead of making it like a huge deal, I would just try to forget about it and just move on with my day and do what I was originally supposed to do instead of dwelling on it. And it helped a lot, to the point where it came few and few, and now I'm where I am now, where I'm almost half a year binge free, and that's the most I've ever been, and I can't see myself ever going back. And the way I got here is, first of all, I stopped tracking macros. I slowly eased myself off. Like, I was so scared to let go of that control because I was stuck in semi-recovery, but I thought that that was helping me, and I didn't know any other way, so it was really hard for me to let go of that. I slowly started to loosen the reins on tracking, so I would eat a little over my macros, and I would try to be okay with that and not use that as an excuse to binge. Like before, when I would track macros, it's either I would stick to them to a T, or I would binge full-blown if I went over them or anything. So I slowly started doing that, and one day I said, you know what, I need to do this. Like, I tried intuitive eating a couple of times, but it never worked because I wasn't truly intuitive eating. I was still subconsciously restricting. So I was like, you know what, I need to try this time. So that's when I went all in. And if you guys aren't familiar with all in, it's basically a process for eating disorder recovery, and I won't go into that into this video because I'm going to make another whole video about how I recovered And so that's the end of today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe. And if you guys feel comfortable, I love to hear about your eating disorder journey. So if you feel comfortable, comment down below, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Bye guys.